Thanks for inviting me. Tonight we're going to focus on the impact of railroads on small towns. But first, I want to share just a few photos of interest that I think you'll find worthwhile. This past summer, I was at the Virginia Museum of Transportation with two of my friends, 6'11" and 12'18". I share a birthday with one of these two. I won't tell you which, but I'm just out of curiosity. How many of you have been there? It's a great museum, and it really is inspiring. I had a great uncle, Harry Hahn, who was a brakeman on the Big Four. These two photos were taken in 1917 in Bucyrus in the winter. I've always admired these photos and thought it would be interesting to be a brakeman, but I don't know if I could handle the weather. When I was in college, I took a trip to the West Coast, and fortunately, somebody left the window open on one of the doors, and I was able to stick my head out in the hills of Montana, and you could see the color schemes of the Great Northern, Northern Pacific, and Burlington as they merged. This is one of my favorite photos, one of the first ones I ever took. So now let's talk about the life of my small town, and it changed forever when the railroad arrived. Where is my hometown? It's Bluffton, Ohio. It's on exit 142 of I-75 between Lima and Findlay. Bluffton University is on the Heartland Conference with Mount St. Joe, just as a reference point. Population 4,000 approximately. What we're going to do is we're going to see three of the railroads that were in this town. Only one exists today. They were the Lake Erie and Louisville, which immediately changed its name, and we'll find out more about it. The Northern Ohio, and then the Interurban, which was the Western Ohio. These are the routes where they would have been. Looking first at, I'm going to refer to this as the nickel plate on the west, Lake Erie and Western. It had many names. This is the in blue, that is the route of the Lake Erie and Western. The village raised $20,000 to bring it to the village, and that's about that's a lot of money today. They did that with subscriptions. This is from a nickel plate dinner car placemat. This is the entire nickel plate road. You think that the elections are controversial today. Read this story that happened in 1873 when a conductor refused to carry about 30 voters. They were men who were going to the polling location about 3 miles out of town, and the conductor would not let them on. You can imagine what happened there. And all I know is that a protest signed by a number of citizens was published, and many harsh words were spoken. Okay. Don't know what the issue was. Here's on the left is the passenger station, and on the right was the freight house. It was the original passenger station. It was moved there in 1904. And neither of those are standing in those locations today, but the passenger station, we'll see that shortly. 1890 timetable, and let me just say for a moment that before the railroads came in Bluffton, the county seat in Lima was 16 miles away. The only way to get to the county seat was by horse, You'd get up very early in the morning, spend a 16-mile trip on a horse, do your business at the county seat, and then come home late at night. Suddenly in 1872, you had at least two options of Lake Erie and Western passenger train to get on at the station, go to Lima, do your business, might come home by supper time. That changed drastically in 1906 when the electric Interurban arrived on Main Street. You could walk to the Interurban. We'll see their timetable soon. You could probably, at 55 miles an hour, you could go to Lima and come back probably before lunch, 1906. Again, bringing the world to a small town in 1893. Over 100 people from Bluffton went to the World's Columbian Exposition in Chicago. And this article lists all of the other towns, many of them smaller than Bluffton. How did they get there? They took the Lake Erie and Western to Findlay, got on the main line of the nickel plate, went to Chicago, came back the same time. 25 years before that would have been unheard of. 1880, 8 years after the railroad arrived. The Bluffton station is a paying one for the railroad company. In July, there were over 2 million pounds of freight shipped here, and the cash earnings of that station was almost $2,000. It's pretty amazing. Great loads of poultry are arriving in Bluffton these days, says a Bluffton News article from 1896. It's one of the largest shipping points for dressed poultry in the United States. This photograph proves that. The photograph really focuses on the farmer and his product. There's a couple generational people dressed in generational garb you can see from young to old men in the background. This is the Bluffton station. The water tower's there. Two things that you probably don't see in this photo, I'll show you now. First of all, there was a kid in that grocery cart. It's probably the photographer's son. You'll see that in some more photos here, some funny things. And look at the guy looking down the track, waiting for the train. There's always one of those guys in the crowd. And there he is in 1896. Excursions, again, making the world a very small place. This one went to Salina, and it was a one-day rate. You could take your wheel along. That meant bicycle if you wanted. There was an extra charge for that. But imagine spending a Sunday afternoon at Grand Lake St. Mary's, the largest man-made body of water in the world. 1899, trip to Put-in Bay, same situation. You could get out of town and come back the same day. I love this story. A number of Bluffton boys went over to Lima Monday to witness the ball game. We understood they made the journey in boxcars. Well, here's a 1907 picture of Bluffton. They probably hopped a train like this, got in Lima, saw the game, and then just waited for another freight to come back, hopped it, and went home. I think today they would be juvenile delinquents. This photograph, I want to point some things out to you, is really a marketing photo for the village of Bluffton. Here's what it says. It tells the viewer that there's a railroad and there's a water tower. And that meant that this town had water for fire protection. There are also some other things, and this tower's 1 year old, so this photo was taken on purpose. And fortunately, that smokestack Just framed everything. I don't know how he did that. Let's look a little closer at this. There's the engineer. Fireman. Thank you very much. I could tell this in a non-railroad crowd and that would have gone over their heads. And there's more like that coming. Stone quarry. Bluffton was a big stone quarry community. Here's a train. 1911, this stone quarry was supplying much of the stone for the track ballast on the road. In 1909, the first 2 weeks of the month in October, almost 300 carloads were shipped from this stone quarry. Today it's a lake, and there's no siding. My mother went on these excursions to Cedar Point. Here's the situation. Believe it or not, over 600 people attended this particular year's trip. That's 11 passenger cars that stopped in Bluffton. You boarded, you went to Sandusky, 73 miles away, spent the day at Cedar Point, came back the same night. You can't do that today. And that was every year in the 1920s that took place. Over 800, 1 year it was over 800 people who attended. 1939, the World's Fair, nickel plate road advertisement in the Bluffton News. Again, you could get on at Bluffton, go to Findlay, go directly to the World's Fair. Bluffton is 16 miles from the Lima Locomotive Works. So every westbound locomotive coming out of Lima went through Bluffton. I think of it more as southbound, but it's westbound. Here's a giant 400-ton locomotive that passed through Bluffton. The editor of the newspaper was a railroad fanatic, and he really got into this, thankfully for me, so I can follow the history of this very closely. This next one went to Bellevue backward because the Lima locomotive turntable was not long enough for the locomotive. It went through, I am told it went through town about 15 miles an hour backwards, all the way to Bellevue. Lima Locomotive Works. Here's an article that tells a little more about it. They had some problems in the Depression. There were only 14 locomotives built in 1939, but they had a backlog, as you can read the article, and things progressed from there. And many people in Bluffton worked there. My wife's aunt was a nurse. When I think of locomotives, I think of Lima Locomotive Works. That's the only, as far as I knew, that's the only place they were built until I went to Roanoke and found out that there were other places. So none of those buildings are standing today. This may not mean anything to you in Cincinnati, but in Bluffton, it was a big deal. The St. Louis Flyer, which stopped in Bluffton, had the Boston Red Sox on a train, had the Washington Senators, St. Louis Browns. People actually went down to the station to see if they could see some of the players on the train. Happened frequently. And then in 1948, you could get on the nickel plate and go to a baseball game and come back again the same day. And these are advertisements in the Bluffton News, so they were locally sponsored. You could see the Browns play. This is the original Brown, and that's the original 49er, by the way. You could do the same thing there. Berkshires were really the only steam locomotive I knew. I didn't know that others existed. Here are some. The one in color was taken in Bluffton. The other one is a Lima locomotives photograph. Here's Berkshire 703 going through, passing the Bluffton station. There's a side track there. This is in the early 1940s. I love this photo, and the person who took it risked his life. That thing is barreling at him probably 65 miles an hour, and I've walked this track. I know how quick that train could have gone from part A to part B. He stepped aside really quickly, but he knew what he was doing, and it's a great photo. Nickel plate was one of the last roads to switch to diesel. 1947, here's an article of the first diesel that came through town. It was a noticeable event. It had a different sound to it, very different. The first diesels on top here was this took this look. The more familiar striped freight nickel plate diesels are on the bottom here. Passenger trains in Bluffton through 1958. Bluffton is not listed on this timetable, but it was a stop. It was a mail train. My dad would drive us down to the station about 10 o'clock in the evening, and we'd wait for it to come in and take off. It's one of those things you did in a small town. I'm going to let you study this photo. There's something that some people say is wrong here. This was in 1961, way after the steam was gone. This article was taken right from the Bluffton News. You can see that the writer was a railroad fanatic. I put this on one of the Ohio Rail Fan websites, and I got this response. What is a Hudson tender doing on a Berkshire locomotive?
Scrap train.
Oh, some of the tenders were sold to the railroad. I know some of the tenders were sold to the C&L and some to the railroad.
Okay. Again, that went right over my head, but it was pretty obvious to the people who knew. Interesting. Golden Spike Limited went to Lima because that's where it was built. This is a 759 going through Bluffton in 1969 at a very fast clip. The entire grade school went down, and if you look real closely, everybody has his or her ears plugged because this train was something they've never seen before and never saw again, heading toward Findlay. And then in the early 80s, 765, now owned by the Fort Wayne Railway Historical Society, came through Bluffton, and there it is. Today, there's only one freight. It's local, and it goes about 35 miles an hour. I could hear it from my house when I still lived there, and I had time to get in my car, drive down to the tracks, take this picture. It was going that slow. About 2:30 in the morning, it would come back. This is the depot. It has been moved to a park. It's been reconditioned. It is now owned by Bluffton Historical Society. It's used by the American Legion, by the Sportsman's Club. It's a rental facility for weddings, birthday parties, all sorts of things. It's very well used. Next, let's visit what I'll call the ACNY. It had many names: the Northern Ohio, but you didn't know this, Pittsburgh without an H, Akron and Western, Cleveland, Delphus, and St. Louis, among others. It came through the northern part of town, and when Bluffton was a population of about 1,800, so there are now a railroad crosses. It came in as a narrow gauge, as did the Lake Erie and Western. They both switched within 10 years to standard gauge. Akron, Canton, and Youngstown, here's the map, goes from Delphus, of all places, to Mogadore, of all places. Goes through Bluffton also. And you can see the other connections. Bluffton raised $5,000 in subscriptions to bring that railroad to town. And that was worth maybe $160,000 today. So a town of under 2,000 were able to subscribe. This is my great-grandfather's receipt. He paid $25 to get the railroad to come to Bluffton. The opening excursion, this is a flyer from it in 1883. And as you look at the towns here, I'm going to point you to Columbus Grove. The next one is Basinger, misspelled. There's only one S in Basinger. It is a farm stop. Pandora is a village. Suter is a farm stop. And so is Steiner, a farm stop. And this particular excursion went to the end of the line at that point. My grandfather was on it. He said that it went slow enough that you could walk alongside, and there were flat cars. A country girl with a new camera captured these two photos of westbound freights between Bluffton and Pandora. She never knew that they would appear on a program like this. Here again, Pittsburgh, Akron, and Western with an advertisement showing the times of its arrival and departures in Bluffton, with telling the reader that it had direct connections at Akron for all points east, direct connections at Cary for Columbus and points south, direct connections at Delphus for all points southwest, and directions at Columbus Grove for points south and north. Here's what that means specifically. In the morning, you could take a Pittsburgh, Akron, and Western from Bluffton to Columbus Grove at a distance of about 10 miles. You could get on the CH&D at Grove, go all the way to Cincinnati. You could do some business there, get back on the northbound train, back to Columbus Grove. You could catch the train to Bluffton and be back by evening. 143 years ago. There are accidents. Here's one, and I'm going to read you a little bit about this. It turns out that a train ran into another one that was sitting at the passenger station. Here's a little bit more. On Saturday evening, this is from the Bluffton News. On Saturday evening at about 6:15, the citizens of Bluffton were given the opportunity to witness an awful destruction to the collision of two trains. Section 2 of local freight number 17 crashed into the rear end section of Section 1 of the same train, which was standing at the main track. Section 1 had pulled in several minutes previous and, being very long, had cut in two and at Main Street crossing to allow for teams, meaning horses, to cross Main Street. The engineer stated that he whistled for down brakes and cut off steam at the usual place east of the Lake Erie and Western crossing, and that under ordinary circumstances his train would have stopped. But having only one brakeman on the train of 24 cars and a slippery track down a heavy grade, he soon discovered that the train was increasing in speed instead of decreasing. He applied the emergency brake and reversed the engine, but the heavy train crowded down upon him with an ever accelerating speed. It was an accident. He would be unable to stop before the crossing, and he began to realize that a collision with Section 1 was going to happen. Here are some of the aftermath of that. The loss in this accident was in the amount of $25,000 or more, which almost broke the company. The wreck was visited Sunday by hundreds of people from the county and neighboring towns. Nearly every visitor carried away a piece of the debris, and the railroad men had hard work keeping them from carrying away the engine. The brakeman on Section 1 was on his first trip and resigned without ceremony, taking the next trip home in the east. Persons desiring photographs of the wreck can get one from Andrew Honstein for 25 cents. That's what one of these is. You can get your choice of 2 different views. Over 200 have already been sold. 2 stock dealers from Genera, shippers of wrecked hogs on the freight, came over Sunday dressed in their Sunday clothes, and people mistook them for the managers of the road and followed them all over the commons in their search for their stock. It was amusing, to say the least. The conductor of Section 1 skipped out immediately after the accident and was not heard of until he appeared at the residence of James Lee, east of town, where he got breakfast. He stated that he was afraid that the engineer of Section 2 would kill him if he caught him. He had slept in a straw stack all night, and he was going to Ada and from there home. So there's a lot going on here. And imagine posing this photograph of the wreck. Well, the Northern Ohio also had excursions. This one to Cuyahoga Falls in 1895, and it says the places where you could visit during that trip. From the Lima Gazette, the Lake Erie and Western engines number 30 and 22 will be sent to Bluffton. The roadbed is not in condition to permit the running of the large Mongols over it. So that was something that was in the works. Here's a small town argument. The Columbus Grove Northern Ohio Railroad Depot has been supplied with electric lights, so says the Bluffton News in 1897. If the Grove Depot can afford electric lights, why not the Bluffton depots? Here's some of the familiar steam power on the ACNY in the 40s on. And there's an advertisement in 1944 for brakemen, boilermakers, machinists, car repairmen. This was during World War II. There was a shortage of employees. They were looking for people. Then the diesel arrived. And again, almost in tandem with the nickel plate, suddenly there was a new whistle in town that people recognized. I was not aware until recently that the ACNY diesel was designed by this man who was familiar with many other railroad designs and automobile designs. I'm told he designed a parking lot on 4th Street in Cincinnati that is not particularly attractive. I didn't know that either. 1951, the final passenger mixed freight stops in Bluffton, and that was a town event. Here are some more of the Fairbanks Morris diesels. One of them derailed in Pandora. My dad drove me over there before school. I think I was tardy, but I checked out the accident, derailing. Here's what the ACNOI looked like in the early 70s. You can see the caboose was in the shape it's in there. The Norfolk and Western diesels were working the line. Remember the blizzard of 1977? Can you believe that it stopped an ACNY freight? That freight sat there for 3 days. Finally dug out by hand, and and then eventually some other equipment. Hard to imagine. Here's a picture of the final freight through Bluffton in 1982. I took some pennies and actually some 50-cent pieces, put on the track in hopes to have something to remember this by. This train was going so slowly that when the train left and I went for the coins, they were embedded in the rail. I don't have any pennies from the last freight. I told this to my mother, and she kind of laughed and said, on the Interurban, you could put pennies on the track there too. It wouldn't smash them. It would just make them very hot. So I guess at least 2 generations of my family did that. Here's the ACNY depot today. It is a retail business, and it is in reconditioned position, but it is in working order. Now our final road is the Western Ohio. It's an Interurban electric, and it lasted from 1906 to 1932. Ohio and Indiana were really the birthplace of the trolley, and as you can see, they were all over the state. Here's what it looked like map-wise. The Lima route, known as the Western Ohio, went from, through trains from Dayton to Cleveland or Dayton to Toledo. The specific Western Ohio was from Piqua to Findlay. Here's the guy who's putting the track down Main Street, and that guy in that black suit just scares me to death. He had to be the foreman. Here they are working on it again, and if you'll notice, you can only read half the sign. It says, "No spitting on sidewalks," referring to chewing tobacco, referring to the 12 saloons on Main Street, Bluffton, Ohio at the time. You can see how the Women's Christian Temperance Union got its start. Here's a locomotive from the CH&D. I didn't realize that it was a Cincinnati steam until I found this article in a 1905 Boston News. Before the electric wires were put up, something else had to come along the tracks to help install the rails, and this was the engine that did it. Here are some more of the cars that were used to construct the interurban track through town. Main Street. Here's another one on the outside of town. Here's the first Interurban coming through Bluffton, January 1906, northbound through to Findlay. And let's look a little closer at it just to check out what's going on here. Very coincidentally, The station in that picture was owned by a Mr. Ed Jones, a furniture store owner. Today, it is an Edward Jones financial service agency. No relation. 1907, I said that you really didn't need a timetable to get on trains in Bluffton. Interurbans. Walk to Main Street. You could see that there were 14 morning trolleys, 18 in the afternoon, 10 in the evening. Freight trolleys mainly after 11 p.m. You could flag stop the Cleveland Limited, go to Cleveland, come back the same day. Here's a Cleveland Limited car, orange and yellow. The Western Ohio's were green and gold striped. So these Lakeshore Electric Railway cars were specially made for the Cleveland Limited. I'd like to read you a little bit about some background on what the interurban meant. Before the days of school buses, children could come to Bluffton from the country riding the interurban in the morning and go home in the afternoon. A grocery salesman from Lima or Findlay could come to town on the interurban, spend the day taking orders from grocers. Then the next day or two, the orders would be delivered. This way, it was possible to have fruit and vegetables in the wintertime from Toledo. On the steam railroad, there wasn't as much attention to detail on this type of business. I was told that a man from Bluffton took the interurban to Lima because he was a diabetic and he could get shots in Lima. The interurbans made a great difference in people's lives because most of the right-of-way were on land donated by farmers. Farmers would give up their land in exchange for a stop being placed at the end of the lane. Anytime, day or night, if a local was operating, the farmer could stand out at night, light a newspaper, flag down the train, and get a ride to town. Bluffton College men's basketball teams took the interurban to play Findlay, Bowling Green, and Toledo. In Findlay, the Western Ohio made a connection to the north and through service operated from Toledo to Dayton. At that time, it was the longest continuous service of electric railroads in the country without a change of cars, 165 miles. So the interurban really changed small town life. Here's a picture in 1906 of the first, or one of them, taken by the same photographer that took that other picture with the kid in the grocery cart. I know that this photographer posed 3 of his best friends on the side there for this thing to take place. A true clash of travel technology. Man, can you imagine being in that horse cart with an electric trolley coming your way? Here's another view, early morning arrival. You can see in the blow up what was going on there. And you look at the overhead, look at all the wires that were involved in this. It was a lot more complicated than it seems. There's a siding in town. Here's a close-up of that. You can see how that looks kind of primitive to me. Yeah. Late 1910. An advertisement telling you you can go to Dayton, Lima, Toledo, Findlay, or Cleveland, or other points on the Western Ohio. Someone told me that there was a business in Bluffton that every time the interurban went by, the lights dimmed. There were substations every 10 miles. And one of the byproducts was that sometimes lights dimmed when the train went by. Here's some looks at that, and you can see this was where the crossing, the tracks went across the Dixie Highway toward Lima. And you see that this is a zoom lens, the photo on the bottom, but it's certainly, you wouldn't see that on a steam road, I don't think. The depots were similar. This is a Rawson depot and a Beaver Dam depot, had the same characteristics. 38 cents an hour, a good opportunity for advancement. 1919. This is a postcard from my uncle who sent the postcard to his uncle, dated April 24th. And he says, "Hello, Unc. You'll see me at the Threshold Saturday the 26th. I'm going to stay until Sunday afternoon." He went to Toledo. There's the Interurban station in Toledo. This guy had faith in the postal system. Mails it on the 24th to tell his uncle that he's going to be there 2 days later. I'm impressed. This is the building on the right. It was the Interurban station in Bluffton. It's on Main Street, and it is now a retail store. Well, the final trip was in 1932, but it soon became ancient history in Bluffton because in 1933, John Dillinger robbed Bluffton Citizens National Bank of $2,100 in a 5-minute robbery, and that took all the attention away from the Interurban. There it is in 1933. The tracks are still embedded under the street in concrete. They were attempted to be taken out during World War II, and it failed. So, can you envision high-speed electric passenger rail today, parallel to or in place of I-75? Oh my goodness. 115 years ahead of its time. Or what are all those railroad tracks doing under Bluffton's Main Street? Thanks for your attention. Have a pleasant evening, and no left turn when a train is approaching. Thank you.